Happy June 12th, everybody. We are talking about RFPs, but we're not talking about RFPs the way you think about it. Today, we're talking about teasing out the RFP question. What's that question? We'll get to that in just a second. But welcome to the IC Topic Chats. We meet every Thursday at noon, my time, Central. A lot of you guys are on the East Coast, so that'd be noon your time, and it's 11 Central anyway. Um, so teasing out the RFP question, I want to say first of what we're not talking about today. Tamara Hamai and perhaps others are going to join us on August 14th. And she's going to talk about her process, which is, she says, has been very successful after going after RFPs. I also want to point out that we've previously had, and if you're here live, Kathleen Sullivan and her decision-making matrix. And so if you're here, I went ahead and posted that you can reach out to Kathleen or reach out to me, and I'll make sure you get a copy, the most recent copy. And there is her presentation as well, which we can include that link to that YouTube video there. So we are not talking about those things that both Tamara and Kathleen have or will talk about in the future. We're talking about this question of whether we should, and and what is going on with RFPs. Why do people say these are great ideas and some people say it's a terrible idea? So let me jump into what is an RFP. There's actually three things. There's probably more. Some people call it as the RFX thing. There's RFIs, there's RFQs, there's RFPs. So in many ways, I kind of put these all under the broad heading of RFPs, but there are technically three different things. An RFI, request for information, is often the early stages of looking for a vendor. So why would anybody issue any of these things? It's because they're trying to identify the best process for identifying a vendor or a contractor to meet your needs, to meet their needs, that institution, that university, that organization, that foundation, etc. There's often purchasing policies that require some process of identifying a vendor that's the best use of public or foundation funds, nonprofit funds. And how do they know that that's the case? Oftentimes it's the idea of having three people who submit a proposal or a quote or information. And so they get to choose among at least three, maybe more. And then they can choose amongst that group and then identify the best, most cost-effective, whatever for their organization. So three types of things. You've got the RFI, request for information, where you're gathering general information. Perhaps you're not ready to make a decision. You're just trying to find out who's out there. What is there to do before they even issue an RFQ or an RFP? They're just trying to figure out, how do we go about making this decision? Who are the types of vendors that could potentially submit a proposal? Maybe this results in a contract right away. In my experience, it's just an early stage before they go after an RFQ. And if an RFI is submitted and it's in an area of your interest, I absolutely positively recommend going after it, because this gives you that early opportunity to engage with a potential client, so they get to know who you are and learn who you are and things like that. An RFQ is oftentimes a kind of like a quicker version of an RFP. It's gathering comprehensive price options for a specific good or service. Those quotes may or may not end up in a contract, but oftentimes they do. I just got an RFQ this week, which I was kind of ironic and timely for this conversation today. The RFQ is usually a shorter, not quite as comprehensive of a proposal process that you're going to send back to them. So in my RFQ, they said we need to know who you are, like a resume and kind of some background on your bio. What are your costs broken down, and whatever else you think is appropriate to this, what we need to do. So to me, that means don't send them a 20-page proposal or longer. What they're looking for is a short snippet. RFQ.
Hey, honey,
Yeah, babe.
can you help me a minute?
Maybe I'm going to go ahead and mute you.
My
How's
stupid
that?
computer has wiped out my entire headset and I can't figure out how to get it back.
I love it. All right, so we'll cut that part out of the session. What do you think? Anyhow, back on the RFP process. So RFQ is oftentimes a shorter version of it all. So the RFP is the thing that a lot of us are talking about, and this is oftentimes a very intensive approach. You may be putting together a full proposal based upon, you could have tens or 20s or 30 pages, maybe hundreds of pages of, uh, of, of something that you need to consider. And maybe you need to go into a whole bunch of deep understanding for an organization and things like that. Um, you're going to put together a formal business document that is a proposal that um, I'm going to go ahead and mute again. Thank, do you think maybe, let's see, Anne, did I lose you? Kathleen, can you keep an eye on
No, I'm
the
here.
Oh, and can you make sure that anybody who takes themselves off mute, just go ahead and
Oh,
mute
gotcha.
them,
Sure.
just so we don't have a problem. I think
Yeah, no
it's
worries.
it's an accident. I'm sure it's just an oversight. Anyway, back on the RFP RFQ process, the proposal oftentimes ends up being a longer document. It's very thorough, and it takes a lot of time to put together. And so the question becomes, why would I go to all this trouble if I'm not going to actually be taken seriously? And so let's talk about the seriousness of proposals, because oftentimes we put so much time, so much energy. We're all qualified. We have this, um, we have backgrounds, we have pricing structures, we have approaches, we understand evaluation, we can do quantitative, we can do qualitative, we can do all these different types of things. We've spent time thinking critically about these things, and to put this all in a big document could take weeks, could take months of time. Why would I do this if I don't think I'm going to be taken seriously? All right, let's get into the seriousness of the RFP question. When we ask our colleagues back in 2015, what are some of the best marketing approaches? The top one is actively soliciting new work from past clients. Not a big surprise there, or getting referrals from past clients. The third one is responding to RFPs. Um, Further down the line is actually when we ask the question, what are some terrible ways for marketing? RFPs also showed up in that same survey. But so we found it in both sides of the equation. When the survey was done again by the independent consulting TIG in 2022, it was the number one. Different question, kind of different kind of scale, but it was the number one approach, which kind of struck me as odd because on the other end, we get arguments against RFPs. Here's a quote from this is Judah Viola's book. She wrote with McMahon in 2010. The argument against RFPs, and you can read this on your own. I'm just going to summarize it. Effectively, this individual is arguing they don't go after RFPs for these three reasons because it's a poor way to solicit um, consultant fit, meaning you're just getting some kind of random document. You don't really understand who I am until you talk to me and we connect. Um, they believe in this, and I believe this is often the case. Consultants are already selected, and the RFP process is just this purchasing kind of um, uh, process that you're going to go through. It's a little kabuki theater. We know who's going to get the contract at the end, but we got to go through this process. Um, And RFPs often focus too closely on the cost and not about the bigger picture of the value of the work. And so we know that we often develop relationships with people who want to continue to work with us. They don't go and issue RFPs. Um, and um, they like our connections, they like our relationships, and they continue to hand us projects. Um, but how do you find that first relationship? I think RFPs are that process that are a good approach in the right situation. So I want to talk about the three types of RFPs that I've kind of heard about, thought about since I've gotten engaged in this whole line of work. And I think when we get into the chat, I'd love to hear what other people are thinking about this. So the first one, well, so three types of RFP conversations. You get the cold RFPs, and that's the one I think that the person in the quote was talking about. A cold RFP is where something comes in, you don't know anything about this organization, and they likely don't know anything about you aside from what maybe you've put out on your LinkedIn or something maybe you put out through your website. Um, they might have heard something, they might have some sort of a casual relationship with you or somebody who knows you, but you really don't know each other yet. You haven't had that chance to develop that relationship. They often put out a very formal document that's looking for a contractor to fill a predetermined need. I use the word contractor because oftentimes their document tells you exactly what they think you should be doing. They may or may not have had involvement with an evaluator for the development of the RFP. And so you know you're going to have to develop a relationship with these people. But or they may have already have a predetermined consultant. Maybe this is just the kabuki theater of RFPs where you're going to go and put all this time and trouble in there so they can satisfy the need of having three proposals so they can select the one they already knew they were going to select. They often are going to have a key determinant around price. It, Hypothetically, if you can get three vendors to meet the basic needs of the whatever program is being broadcast out there that they're requesting proposals for. Whoever has the cheapest price, that's who they're going to go after. It's a bit like asking for people to bid on building a building, and whoever comes in the cheapest gets to build the building as long as they have the minimum amount of requirements. You probably do not have a previous relationship with these folks. Right, that's the cold RFP. And this is the one that a lot of us are talking about when we say, I don't trust RFPs, I don't understand RFPs, I'm not sure that this is a good approach for me. And hold the phone on this one because in many ways, this is going to be the conversation I think Tamara Hamai is going to take on in August about how to approach these cold RFPs. Now, I think there's also the thing that a lot of us respond to are warm RFPs. This is where we have a relationship with the client. We have an inside track on what's going on. Maybe we've already done work with them. Maybe we know these people. Maybe they're previous clients who just moved to a new organization and they're like, hey, I really want to work with you. Make sure you complete this proposal. Maybe you're the predetermined winner. Okay. I'm not going to go into a whole ethics conversation on how this is done. I think all of us who've been around the block for a while realize that RFPs are often predetermined, and we may or may not be a part of that. And I try and be as ethical and have as much integrity as I possibly can. However, these organizations are going to operate however they're going to operate. Um, Frankly, when you're in the warm RFP process, um, just taking it aside from any poor ethics, just assuming the organization is working with integrity, you may have a case in asking for more um, for a larger contract, not necessarily for doing the same thing that but I'm saying you can probably ask for more because they understand the the depth of your services. They understand how um, organized, how well you do your work. All right. There's a third category that gets thrown into this RFP conversation, and this is proposal support. And this is where I've always gotten confused when people started talking about RFPs, because frankly, I think proposal support, which is an organization finishing something regarding a they're completing a proposal, but it's really not you submitting the proposal. It's you supporting a proposal that somebody else is submitting to an organization. So, classic example, somebody wants to write a grant proposal for the National Science Foundation. They're going to do some fantastic thing with teachers or students or something like that, in school, out of school, but they need that required evaluator. And so I would support them with their proposal submission by writing an evaluation section. It's an excellent business development approach. It's part of our business model. We probably complete, oh, I don't know, 50 or 60 um, of these projects a year. It's all pro bono. I always recommend using an MOU or a memorandum of understanding. And I like it because in many ways you get to start off early with an organization that is trying to go after this big idea. They oftentimes are, it's a low barrier of entry to connect with an evaluator because they're just kind of desperate to find somebody who's really good at this. And so, when they find me and they agree to meet and work with us through the MOU, we've got this, we're all in this together mentality. And so, uh, you're fairly certain that you're going to get this contract after the grant's funded. That's why I use an MOU to avoid that process. Anyway, the proposal support process is really, in my mind, unquestionably a fantastic way to go about and a fantastic RFP process, but it's not the clear, cold, warm RFP process that we were talking about in the previous two slides. But I think it gets confused there. All right, so wrapping things up, I've got 5.5 thoughts on RFPs. First, I think we need to make sure we're differentiating when we're talking about RFPs among these different types of RFPs. Are we talking about a warm RFP where we kind of have an inside track on what's going on? We're talking about a cold RFP where we're just kind of randomly, it's not random, but sometimes it feels random that something comes into your inbox from somebody you've never heard of, and you're putting together this process and you're kind of praying that you're going to be taken seriously. So warm and cold, or are you supporting somebody who's actually writing a proposal and you're just on the support? You're supporting the process. In many ways, our warm RFPs are ideal because we kind of understand what's going on. We know that this is probably a good place for us to be writing proposals. That proposal support is different, and like I said, it's a great business approach. Kathleen, we shared it already, has this wonderful RFP matrix. It's definitely a good approach when you're thinking about that cold RFP process, right? Is this even in alignment with who I am, what I want to do, those sorts of things? Right now, to be completely honest, that cold RFP approach is tempting because a lot of us have lost projects. We've seen things canceled. We're a little anxious around the environment, particularly if we're reliant on federal funding, or if we've previously been involved with any projects that have any of those banned words, whatever. Uh, so I know we at our organization are probably a little more amenable to going after projects we wouldn't have gone after before, just to make sure we're underscoring our revenue needs. But I will say, if you're going to go in this approach, I would come back on August 14th to hear Tamara's presentation on how she approaches these. So this is the part where we're going to get into comments and questions, and I'm going to stop sharing, but I'm also going to stop recording. So everybody out there in YouTube land, see you later. Everybody who's live, stick around for some conversation.